So I've been driving this 2004 Accord for the past 7 years now, and I figured since she was 20 years old that I should do a long-term review of her and what I like, what I don't like, and what's been done to keep this on the road for the past 20 years. So to start with, what I love about the car is the general driving dynamics. The brakes, the rack and pinion, the suspension are awesome. You got a double wishbone front end with a stabilizer bar, and you got multi-link in the rear with coils on the actual shock bodies, whereas the new Accords, they have a control arm, a spring, and a shock separately. I like this design better. This engine, it's the K24A4. It's an undersquared motor, which means she's got a fat torque curve. And this was the first dual camshaft engine in an Accord that had coil on plug and was driven by a timing chain. So this car doesn't have timing belt water pump services. Another thing I love is the fuel economy. You're getting well over 30 miles a gallon on the highway. The thing I love is this fuel tank. It's 17.1 gallons, which is great for road trips. An Accord now would have maybe a 15-gallon tank, if that. The transmission is something I love on this. You got very, very tall overdrives. So at a little over 3,000 RPM, you're going 90 miles an hour in this car. And it shifts very crisp. It's as if Honda was trying to simulate somebody banging gears. And the durability is pretty good. I change the fluid on this frequently. No issues. The interior is something that I really love. It's a nice place to spend time. The materials are great. Everything is put together really nice. The longevity. If you do what you need to do, your services, your fluids, whatever's necessary, it'll last a really long time. When it comes to stuff I don't like about the car, there isn't much, but one of them is road noise. Being that the suspension is so very firm, you get a lot of road noise. On uneven pavement, you can hear it a lot. You'll hear like pinging sounds coming from the tires hitting the ground. You hear a lot. And then another thing I don't like is, what kind of goes back to the suspension, it doesn't ride as smooth as a brand new Accord. Those cars are straight up luxury cruisers with McPherson strut. They're just not kind of sporty like this. But you know what, that's all right. Slow. The car, if you put the AC compressor on, is slow. It's very peppy if you roll down the windows, but I would save the AC compressor for the freeway. And finally, the factory radio sucks. It's an AM, FM, CD player, which doesn't sound that bad, but they all break. The single disc base model units on these cars all break. They were made by Alpine, and the failure rate is so high. You'll get audio failure, screen failure, parasitic draw on your battery. The 6-disc EX cars don't have this problem, I notice. I've seen guys with V6 Accords, and they'll have like a 20-year-old radio unit, and they're working just fine. But that is something to look for on these cars. Well, now for the good stuff. So the car was purchased in October of 2003. There were various tire replacements, oil and transmission fluid intervals, one front brake job with new fluid, and one documented battery. I don't know if the battery was placed any more times than that, but that was done in 2015. So in 13 and a half years, the car is just running on fluids and brakes and battery maintenance. I think that's pretty impressive. So in 2017, I come into the mix. My grandmother gave it to me when I was 21 years old. The car had 108,108 miles. The OEM radio unit was failed. The idle air control valve would occasionally run at 500 RPM, and it would kind of figure itself out, so I just left it alone. One headlight was out, the third high brake light was out, and the airbag light was on. So later on that year, in December of 2017, I got both new low beams, third brake light replaced, and then a while later, that's pretty impressive, August 31 of 2018, I did the transmission drain via the coolant line several times to clean the fluid out. The window regulator died in December of 2018. I went to go put that window up, and she went snap, and that was it. Bye-bye $350. So later on in 2019, I got two tires mounted, and the steering wheel was shaking, so I don't know if the alignment or the mount and balance fixed it, but that fixed it, so I've been riding smooth ever since. And then later on that year, this is where I started to put money into the car. In 2019, I got a Metra dash kit that went right here, and I got this Pioneer radio. So now I had finally had music in the car, but this failed OEM unit was still here, and it would still suck down a little bit of your battery. I never got stranded by the parasitic battery draw, but it was a thing. Like, you would have no key in the car, and that radio would flash its screen, and you knew it was using 12 volts, and it really was frustrating. So after the radio, I put in a new battery. It still worked, but the battery had been sitting in the sun for a few years, and it was 4 years old, so I was just like, let's get a new one. And then in 2019, in June, the door lock cylinders got stuck. For a while, I couldn't lock this car, so you couldn't keep anything in this car for a long time. But I got that, so finally I could lock the car with the key. The original serpentine belt, this is pretty impressive, was on the car from 2003 to 2019. Had 127,000 miles on it. Was squeaking like mad. Replaced that finally. The rack and pinion was really, really leaking. She would leave a puddle underneath herself, so I got a brand new rack and pinion and a new air filter in July of 2019. And got a headlight restoration in 2019, in September. February of 2020. NGK Iridium spark plugs. Got new coolant for the first time. In April of 2020, I got rear drum brakes and shoes. And then May 4th, I resealed the VTEC solenoid and the crankshaft seal. So those were seeping oil. And then in June of 2020, I got front and rear engine mounts because those things were getting bad. They were aftermarket mounts. The intake hose had ripped and there was a bit of a vacuum leak, and the power steering pump was dripping onto the alternator. So that was a good bit of money there, but the car was so much nicer. And that was at 132,000 miles. And then just 5 days later, I'm getting a brake fluid flush because it was dirty. And then in July of 2020, the hazard switch that was causing an SRS light. That was a do-it-yourself install. That was really easy. And then the headliner. This was a huge job. After so long of sitting in the sun, the headliner was sagging, and if you open up the windows, it would flap in the wind. It was really embarrassing. So I ordered a new headliner OEM from the dealer in Texas, and then I had some upholstery shop in town do it. That was a good bit of money, but the car was so much nicer. And then in July of 2020 at 132, the idle air control valve, I finally got to replacing it. Let's see. And the car started idling better. Give me a minute. Okay. So I got a free driver's belt buckle under the dealer warranty. They have a lifetime warranty on seat belts. That was awesome. So finally I had no more lights in the dash. For the longest time I had an SRS light. And then at 133,000 miles in August, I got a drain and fill, and I replaced the transmission filter just for good measure. And then in September of 2020, I got a new Duralast remanufactured starter. It still worked, but on cold starts you get that. So that got replaced. And then I had paintless dent removal performed on my driver's fender because when I got the car, that was pushed in a little bit. So now it looked better. Let's see. In December of 2020, my front struts were seeping a little bit of oil. Everything was still working, but I had money at the time because I was working during COVID. So I got 4 new struts from Duralast and had them installed. And then later on in February of next year, I get 2 new tires. So now I've got matching tires. I didn't have matching tires when I got the car. And then later on in February of 2021, I noticed my compliance bushings were all ripped up. So I got the compliance bushings and the 2 other little bushings for each control arm. Had the control arms removed, had everything pressed in and aligned. And then I had new brake pads and rotors installed in 2021 in April at 136. This is cosmetic, but I got 4 new wheel covers because I had curb rash in May of 2021. My license plate light wouldn't stick to the trunk. It would kind of dangle low. So I got a new one of those. That was pretty cheap. It was like a $27 part at $139K. On my cylinder head, there's a VTC strainer gasket that was seeping a little bit of oil behind this power steering pump. So I got one of those. Let's see. I guess I got a nail, and I got a bolt in the tire. I'm getting unlucky. So I got a free tire from the tire shop. And then another nail in the tire in November of 2021. So that's some great luck there. In January of 2022, my quarter tail light on the left side was leaking water when I washed the car. So the eBay junkyard came in handy. I used one of those. Oil pressure switch was seeping a little bit of oil in 2022, February, at 143. This was really good. I got this Metra doubled-in kit. It's $250, but I think it's worth every penny on these cars. So I finally got rid of the OEM unit that was failed and having parasitic draw. Plus, this just looked a lot nicer. I had a little storage pocket installed, and I've been rocking with this setup ever since. No issues. So going to March of 2022 at 144, I noticed my engine, when I revved it up to 5,000 RPM, would get a pinging sound. And then the next day she was showing a P0325 for a knock sensor failure. So I had to get one of those at the dealer, but luckily they kept those in stock at the dealer, so she was out the same day. And then March of 2022, my cheap aftermarket front and rear mounts failed. So I figured because the car was so old, let's do all 6. We'll get transmission mounts, engine mounts, and the little motor mount on the side. And then shortly after that, my car was getting an exhaust rattle. I thought it was a knock, but it was an exhaust rattle. There's an insulator bushing on the subframe that isolates the exhaust system from the rest of the car, and that had deteriorated. So my exhaust system, when you put it in reverse especially, would rest against the car and go brrrr. So I had to get that fixed. That was a $30 part and an hour of labor. That wasn't too bad. And then I redid the springs on my Duralast struts. There were these pre-built assemblies, and turns out they only sold Accord V6 springs on those struts. So me having a 4-cylinder car, the front of my car was like sitting a good bit higher, as if it was like a leveled out pickup truck, and it rode a lot stiffer than it should. And then I went to the eBay junkyard yet again and got some springs off a 2005 LX 4-cylinder, and now she's been riding like a dream. The front end sits like it should. It's nice and soft, and everything's been great. Okay, going ahead into, June of 2022, I had the whole entire VTEC solenoid replaced because it was dripping oil again. And then she was showing a P0457 code for the EVAP purge. So I got a new solenoid for that. That was like $500. And they gave me a free headlight restoration. Thanks. And that was 146,000 miles. And then I threw in another battery for good measure. I like keeping fresh batteries in my car because if it ever doesn't start, then I know it's not the battery. And I also noticed my negative battery terminal was very worn out and loose because at one point the car didn't start. And I wiggled the thing and I noticed it was loose. I had to tighten it up. So I got a whole new battery cable with a negative terminal on the end. That was really cheap. And then I got another nail in the tire. So I got a mismatched Ironman tire. Not happy about that. But I continued on. So I got my power steering fluid flushed, brake fluid flush, transmission drain and fill, and an air filter done at 148,000 in August. And then this is really awesome. I'm still rocking these tires to this day. That's how good they are. But I got 4 Falken Zyx ZE960 tires. These tires have been awesome. If you're looking for Accord tires that last a long time and grip, those are awesome tires. And then later on in October, I replaced the HVAC temperature door. It's right by that pedal. I'm not sure if you can see it. But for a couple years, the, what's it called? The blender would go click, 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 click. And I would kind of ignore it because it still worked. And then later on in 2022, the thing, I put my key in, the car would go, eh. So I knew that that blend door was going bad. So that was a $50 part, but that wasn't too bad. And then this is where things get a little bit weird. In January of 2023, I noticed the AC system only cooled on this side. On the driver's side, it was as if you had no AC at all, but the AC worked. So I took her in for an AC check. I had them use dye on the system, check for leaks. They couldn't find anything, and they recharged it, and then it worked amazing. So later on, I get a new serpentine belt because it's squeaking. You really can't play around with serpentine belts on these cars because if it throws off, you won't have a water pump. And then I replaced the A and B rods on the windshield. Underneath the cowl, there's these little rods that move your windshield wipers, and the ends of that have little bushings, and those things wear out. And then your wiper will swing out farther than it should and hit your pillar. And it's very loud and annoying. So I got that done. Okay, what else now? The engine coolant was replaced at 153,000 in February of 2023. I don't know if I mentioned that. And then I crashed the car into a carport wall in, April 2023. So I had to get an aftermarket bumper cover from Amazon, have it painted, and then installed. So that was a lot of fun. This was a holy crap moment, but I luckily didn't blow out the car. My PCV valve got stuck, and this car was basically dropping its oil level, and I had no idea this was happening. So I'm swinging this thing around in the canyons. I hit a hard corner, and the oil light just flashed and then stopped. So I stopped the car, checked the dipstick, nothing. Put it back in. All right, so I ease it down the canyon, drop a quart of oil in. It's on the bottom dot. Drop another quart in. It's at 5 quarts. So this thing, I was swinging this car around on 3 quarts, and I'm lucky I didn't hurt the car. Did an oil sample report and everything, and there was no damage, but man, did I luck out. So I got these nice WeatherTech front and rear mats in the back, and a trunk mat. That was a good upgrade. Kind of expensive, but they're nice. And then in August of 2023, I got a new Denso AC compressor. And what happened was the AC worked amazing, but the compressor was rattling. So I knew the thing had just about had it. So I got a new Denso compressor. That thing's been working amazing. And then I got a transmission drain and fill in September. My tie rod ends finally started clunking after about 20 years in October at 160,000. And then in November, I've actually found a satin silver metallic DX trim in the junkyard, and I stole its driver's headrest because mine was kind of floppy. So I put that in mine, and mine's been nice. And then in January the 2nd at 162, I got the radar detector. That's a lot of fun. Actually works quite well for a cheap one. And then at 164,000 miles, I noticed my radiator was all crusty. There was this blue-greenish stuff coming out of the top end tank, so I knew it was time to give her some attention. So I got a Denso radiator, an Aisin water pump, an OEM Honda thermostat, upper and lower hoses, Gates hoses. I had worm clamps on the car, but I got the OEM spring clamps, so that was nice. That was February 15 of 2024 at 163. They also told me at the dealer I had 2 millimeters of brake left, so I got, 7 days later I got front brake pads, and I resurfaced the rotors. So that's where the car stands right now. I think it's in really good shape. I think the future and plans for this car are definitely paintless dent removal. So she's got a ding right there. The doors are kind of wavy. Let's see. You got clear coat peeling, a ding right there. So yeah, the car needs to be repainted. I mean, my goals for this car are to keep it forever. So I really want something that is show worthy, something I can take around and so people say, wow, that's really nice for what it is. Because you can see the paint's really, really rough. And the roof is bad. But that's my 2004 Accord. She's not going anywhere. But I want to show everybody what it's like to have these cars long term. Yes, it's not going to be free, but it's very rewarding to do the maintenance. Later, guys.